79-year-old George Owens was a Nolensville resident. He'd been an associate minister of the New Hope Baptist Church in Nashville, Tennessee for over 20 years. People loved him, and he was very popular with his church. He'd been married to his high school sweetheart, Aileen, for 6 decades. In July of 1985, his wife travelled to Ohio to visit her niece. At 6:30 a.m. on Monday, the 22nd of July, she returned to Nashville bus stop as scheduled. He was supposed to pick her up from there when she arrived back from the trip to Ohio. He never turned up. She was left there sitting for an hour before she decided to contact George's brother Alfred, and he in turn arranged to collect her instead. He tried to call George before he left, but the phone was never answered. When Aileen arrived back at their home, she knew that something was wrong. There was no sign of George, and his car was not in the garage. She and Alfred went inside and found that there were 2 place settings on the kitchen table. He immediately contacted the authorities, but the investigation turned up nothing. 6 days later, George's car was found abandoned on a remote rural hilltop more than 100 miles from his home. The keys were in the ignition and the back door was open. His cane was propped up against the car, and his jacket and a pole of wood were inside. There was no indication of his whereabouts and no signs of a struggle or foul play. His wife stated that it would be uncharacteristic of him to abandon his car, and that he never walked long distances without taking his cane. Within a week, a local television station aired a missing person bulletin about George. Several people in another part of Tennessee recognised his picture. On Monday the 22nd of July, 3 hours after he was meant to have picked his wife up at the Nashville bus station, George was spotted 80 miles away, travelling along Route 13. He was at a gas station at Santa Fe. He stopped to have a flat tyre repaired. The owner remembered that George paid him in cash. He then asked for directions to Nolensville, but the owner apparently misheard him and gave him directions to Lobelville. No one knows what George was doing in that part of Tennessee. His house was located 30 miles from Nashville, and the gas station in Santa Fe was 50 miles away. Lobelville was more than 100 miles from his home. On the afternoon of the 23rd of July, a full day after George was supposed to pick his wife up in Nashville, he was seen in a market in downtown Lobelville. He asked a worker at the market named Mary Jo for some ice cream. After he purchased some, he went back into his car. A few minutes later, he came back and purchased some cigars. He started talking about how he and his wife used to dance. He then started to show some concern and told her that he couldn't find his wife. She believed that he was disorientated and confused. Mary Jo called the local clinic to see if his wife was there. However, there were no patients that fit her description. He then left the store and vanished. 5 days had passed after visiting the market before his car was discovered 12 miles from there. An extensive search and rescue operation was organised, but no trace of him could be found. However, the investigation did turn up one significant clue. A woman who lived near the scene claimed to have seen a pickup truck following George's car up a dirt road, where it was later found. 15 minutes later, the witness saw the same truck coming back down the road alone. Investigators were unable to determine who the truck driver was. They were also unable to explain what was found in and around George's car. They noticed that there were several piles of wood around the car. His family said that one of his habits was to go around his house, pick up wood, and place it in piles. However, Aileen claimed that George's car was like his baby, and that he would not leave a large amount of wood in the back seat. Furthermore, he never walked far without his cane. Investigators tried to determine what happened to George. Some thought he may have met with foul play after he left the market. Others suspect that he may have suffered a stroke and become confused and disorientated. He may have then left his car in the woods and wandered off. Sadly, his wife passed away in 1989. To this day, it remains a mystery of what became of George, and the case remains unsolved. On Friday the 14th of January 1983, 38-year-old Terri McClure married in Lake Tahoe, Nevada. On the night of his wedding, his new wife and their parents all decided to visit a nearby casino to celebrate the occasion. He had his 62-year-old mother, Terri McClure, by his side. Terri was living by herself. However, when Tim was in his 20s, he had lived on and off with her. They often dined out and visited local casinos. At 10 p.m, Terri said goodbye to her son after he walked her to her car. She was planning to return home to Reno, about an hour's drive away. She was never seen alive again. At 6 p.m. the next evening, Tim and his new wife went to Terri's home to visit her. However, she was not there. After calling several friends and relatives, Tim called the police to report her missing. 3 days later, her car was found in the parking lot of Carson City Casino, about half an hour away from Lake Tahoe. She was found twice shot in the head inside, and was believed this occurred on the night of Tim's wedding. Her doors were locked, and she was sitting upright. The authorities discovered that the keys were in the ignition, her purse was missing, but her jewellery remained on the body. Circumstantial evidence seemed to point to Tim as being responsible for taking her life, and the following day the police began looking at Tim as a suspect. However, the Nevada District Attorney declined to prosecute. He, along with many of his friends and family, insisted that he was innocent and that the perpetrator remained at large. From the beginning, Tim was considered a suspect by authorities. When questioned, he told police that after saying goodbye to her at 10 p.m, he returned to the casino. Since his new wife was gambling with her parents, he decided to gamble alone for about 2 hours. He then rejoined her, and they went dancing until dawn the next morning. Authorities, however, have been unable to substantiate their whereabouts for that night. They were also unable to name any of the places that they had been to that night. Tim also told police that 2 days before Terri's body was discovered, he had searched the main highway between Lake Tahoe and Reno for her purse. The authorities found it odd that he retraced her steps, looking for an item that nobody had known was missing at the time. He claimed that his sister had given him the idea to go out looking for it. Tim claimed that he searched the parking lots of the casino on Terri's route, looking for her car. He looked through every lot on the route except for one, the parking lot where her body was later found. He explained to the authorities that he had a gut feeling she was there, and it would have destroyed him to find her, so Holy Spirit had protected him by keeping him away. The investigators were also suspicious of a phone call Tim had made to cancel Terri's credit cards. He claimed that he made the call on Monday, the 17th of January, which was the day that her body was found. The credit card company claimed that he called on Friday, before she even disappeared. Authorities received a memo written by the credit company's employee. It stated that on Friday, Tim told them that Terri was deceased. He, however, claimed that the employee made an error. 6 months prior, Terri took out a $10,000 insurance policy on her life. Tim and her sister were named as beneficiaries, which also raised suspicions on Tim. He, however, claimed that it simply was not true. On the 14th of February, 1 month later, Tim and his wife agreed to take polygraph tests. Both indicated deception. In the interviews, they had no answers as to why the machine was telling them that they were being deceptive. All the circumstantial evidence was eventually submitted to the Nevada District Attorney, but he deemed it insufficient to arrest Tim McClure. Eventually, Tim was arrested for taking his mother's life, though in January of 1993, the District Attorney decided not to prosecute. The case was dismissed with prejudice. The question which he failed asked if he knew who took Terri's life, which he claimed made the situation awkward and uncomfortable, causing him to fail it. The ruling meant that he can't ever be arrested in this case. Tim remains the prime suspect. Her granddaughter had commented that much of the remaining relatives believe that Tim took her life, and the ex knows he did. To this day, the case remains unsolved. Matt Chase was a 22-year-old man who moved from Medford, Oregon to Los Angeles, California. He shifted there with his friends, who were also siblings, Teresa and Steve Dahl, he had known since childhood. At 11:45 p.m, on the night of the 8th of June 1988, Matt and Teresa returned home from dinner when Matt realised that he forgot to deposit a paycheck. Teresa lent Matt her car and asked if he could pick up some cat food on the way back. That night, when he left their house, Matt took only his keycard with him and left his wallet at home. It would have only taken about a quarter of an hour to complete these tasks. The following morning, when Matt had not returned, Teresa and Steve called the police. They then called Matt's bank. Steve pretended to be Matt in order to find out whether his account had been used. The bank confirmed that several transaction attempts had been made. When the Dahls told this to the police, they felt that something bad may have happened to Matt. Authorities reviewed Matt's account details and determined that he had successfully deposited his check and withdrew some money. Matt apparently returned to the same bank half an hour later and attempted to withdraw $280, even though the amount was over his limit he had set up. Police theorised that Matt was trying to alert the authorities by entering the wrong amounts. Matt attempted to withdraw cash 2 more times that night. Each time he asked to take out $200, and each time it was denied due to insufficient funds. 1 minute later, $100 was requested, but this was also denied because Matt's cheque wasn't cleared. 11 minutes later, the card was used again at another branch in another neighbourhood. Again, the withdrawal was unsuccessful. This time, a hidden camera took security shots of Matt while he used the ATM. The picture revealed something disturbing: an unidentified individual standing very close to him, hovering over Matt's right shoulder. The authorities suspected that Matt may have been abducted shortly after his first transaction by the man in the photograph. Over the next 1.5 days, there were 5 more withdrawal attempts. By this time, Matt's paycheck had cleared, so $400 was paid out from his account. Finally, the card was impounded by the ATM after the Dales placed a stop on it. They hoped that the police could obtain fingerprints from the card, however, none were found. It is believed that the card was either wiped clean or the abductor used gloves. Matt's parents came down from Oregon to search for their son. They were hoping to find any trace of him. Authorities suspect that Matt may have been injured in a mugging or was walking in the streets with amnesia. The Dales distributed missing flyers with Matt's picture on it at a local homeless shelter, but ran out. Some of the volunteers recognised Matt just from his driver's licence. They believe that Matt had stayed and eaten a few meals at the shelter before. They even accurately described Matt's physical appearance, describing him as quite lanky. This gave Matt's friends and family hope that he was still alive. A few weeks after Matt's disappearance, the car that he was driving was found abandoned close to where he vanished. The car was examined, but no usable fingerprints were found. They did, however, find a blue bandana that did not belong to Matt or Teresa. It was suspected of being left behind by the abductor, and 2 composite sketches were made of him. He was described as somewhat shorter and stockier than Matt. Matt's family and friends hoped that he was still alive and safe, however no trace of him was found. The case was solved when on the 17th of September 1988, his remains were found in a ravine near Pasadena, though his body was not identified until the 29th of March 1989 due to the difficulty of tracking Matt's dental records to verify who it was. He had been shot shortly after his disappearance, and it was believed that the 22-year-old gang member David Measer was responsible. Ironically, the same thing happened to him on the street corner of Rampant area on the 10th of June 1988, just 2 days after Matt vanished. It is believed that David's life was taken by other gang members. When interviewed by the police, David's girlfriend identified him as the man in the surveillance photos. Other circumstantial evidence also linked him to the events. Although the possibility of accomplices wasn't dismissed, the case was cleared by police and considered closed since the main perpetrator was no longer alive.